How's it going, everybody? In today's video, I'm going to talk all about why I switched from my Canon 200D, which I've used and loved for, nearly 2 years actually. I got it in late November 2017, and why I switched to a Canon EOS M50 mirrorless camera. I've had it for a week already. This part, it's way less bulky, got less of a grip, but considering I have tiny hands, if you're a dude or just someone with big hands, I don't know if you like the M50, but I like it. Actually, the M50 has been out of the market for over a year, and this video is nothing new. It's just my personal record of my experience switching to it. But I know a lot of people are just getting to mirrorless in 2019, and even with the release of the M6 Mark II just this month, a lot of people are looking to get the M50 just because there's a price drop and people like the fully articulating LCD screen. By the way, this is not the M50. I'm shooting this video on the M50. This is the 200D that I switched from. So I don't know if you can see on screen. This is the M50 is reflected. I don't have a mirror, sorry. Weight-wise, it's not much, with the lens mounted, it's not much lighter than the 200D because I don't really mount heavy lenses in my 200D. Now I know a lot of people who switch to mirrorless from DSLR will notice like, wow, the weight difference is so drastic. But for me, it's just a little because I've already slimmed down my DSLR gear from before. I prioritize weight over anything because to start with, I'm not a pro. I just like to take photos, and for me, the priority is really weight and bulk. For the past 3 years, my kit has been either this 200D or the SL2 as the Americans call it, or the KISS X9, what Canon calls it in Japan. The one before that I had was the Canon 100D, which is the SL1 in North America, and KISS X something else in Japan. That one, the 100D, is also very small and light. They marketed towards women in Japan, actually. I think it did very well among women just because of the small hands. And at the time, mirrorless was just half a decade old. People just didn't want to be guinea pigs. They really gravitated towards this tiny DSLR series, the SL1 and the SL2, or the 100D and the 200D. I've mounted two pancake lenses on it. This 24 EF-SM, this 40mm pancake EF STM lens. Ignore the adapter down below. That's the adapter for the M50. I forgot to take it out. With the adapter, it's longer and bulkier, but without the adapter, the actual lens is just this. It's that small. The third lens I used in this 200D up until a week ago was the 10 to 18mm, which is ultra-wide lens. I really like that lens. It's super lightweight. It's actually, the optical quality is not that amazing. It's great in the outdoors when the light is good, but indoors if it's a little dim, it's not that amazing. But it's not crappy either. Half of it is in the skill of the photographer anyway, and I'm not that skilled, so can't really be blaming a very cheap lens. That's like one of the cheapest ultra-wide crop camera lenses I've seen. Like, have you seen Sony's crop factor ultra-wide lenses? They're very expensive. That 10 to 18, I've had it for 5 years. I really loved it. I just sold it last week because I got EF-M 11 to 22 ultra-wide lens, which is for the M series, the cheaper mirrorless line of Canon. You'll see it inserted in the video because it's actually filming me right now. I mounted it in the camera. With the 10 to 18 EFS mounted on this, it's very bulky, but it's actually very light. So according to my notes, the 10 to 18mm STM weighed 240 grams. The 11 to 22 weighed more or less the same thing. The M50 weighs 387 grams. This weighs 453 grams. So it's just not that big of a difference. The difference really is in the bulk. When you have it around your neck or when you're traveling in a little backpack, that's when you feel the advantage. This Canon 200D that I'm holding right now, I put it up for sale. Once I sell this very tiny 24mm lens, I plan to get the EF-M 22mm, which I'll be pairing with that M50. It's just as tiny. I don't think they can make it any tinier, but I think it's just a hair lighter than that. In the meantime, while this is not yet sold, I didn't buy the EF-M 22mm yet. The last lens I plan to be using with the M50 is this 40mm EF STM, which also a tiny pancake lens, just like this 24mm. I have it now in a Viltrox EF to EOS M adapter. Without the adapter, this is the 40mm pancake. It's that tiny, like a pancake. You're gonna be wondering, why don't I just get something? I think they have like a native one for the EF, was it a 30? I don't want to spend anymore. I very rarely use that focal length. My most frequent one is the ultra wide. The next one is the 24mm when I was using this 200D. Very rarely do I need to use this 40mm, so I'll just keep it. I could opt to sell this and then get that 50mm 1.8 STM. It's kind of newish, maybe it came out in the past 3 years, but that that focal length is even more impractical for me. It's just like the difference of 10 millimeters, it's way more zoomed in, and I rarely have to shoot like that focal length. It's not saying that for no reason. I have used a 50 millimeter exclusively for a year before. Not the 1.8 STM, though. I got the budget mid-range one, the 50 millimeter 1.4 USM. That was before the days of the STM. Actually, that wasn't that heavy. 200 something grams, which is still double the weight of this 40 millimeter, double the weight of the 50 millimeter 1.8. Mounted in this adapter, it's just gonna get very long. Like, what's the point? Rarely use that. So I'm just keeping the 40 millimeter. I may yet change my mind in the future, of course, but for now, that's what the lineup is gonna be. With the adapter mounted to either the 40 millimeter pancake or the 24 millimeter pancake, it's already the height of a normal lens. It's no longer a pancake. This is like around the height of the 50 millimeter 1.8 STM. There's one thing I want to point out. It's not a major deal breaker, but the 200D, it has a little kind of hole port or whatever you call it on the side. So this is the microphone input, and it's got a smaller one. The microphone input is like the regular earphone jack size. It's got a slightly smaller one, 2.5 millimeter, I believe, and you can plug in this external wired trigger into it. When you take a photo, you can do like this, and it just takes a photo. During the time I bought this, which was maybe 10 years ago, only the very expensive cameras could be controlled wireless with a remote control. You gotta have that infrared thing, or I think the radio triggers thing, but I just kept using it. It was fine. With the M50, I noticed it didn't have that. I rarely use it, by the way, but once in a while I do use it. Sometimes I mount something on the tripod and I'm shooting little toys or something, and I don't want to shake it because I'm just very clumsy. If you want to shoot like long exposures, because you don't want to be like, the M50 doesn't have the port for this anymore. So you're gonna wonder, well, what does it mean? Do you have to hire a child who has very steady heads and does not breathe in the camera? No. Now that cameras are mini computers, they actually have wireless, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and you can connect them to your phone and just use the phone as a remote control. Progress. The 200D Mark II came out this year. It's very similar to this 200D. It's not really an upgrade, maybe just a very slight upgrade. The thing is, one step backwards is that it doesn't have the universal hot shoe pin thing. I don't know what you call it, the one in the middle that allows you to mount third-party generic flashes. It's something I do use once in a while, so the fact that I took it out, it's not a deal breaker, because now they sell all these little adapters. You can just mount it wireless or whatever, but the M50 still has that little hot shoe pin, and the 200D Mark II lateral upgrade doesn't. So I ended up not getting that 200D Mark II over. I have the 200D, but I'm not getting its successor. I've used my strap, this camera, for 3 generations of bodies already. I finally decided to get a new one just because it's kind of getting ratty. The part here that's attached to the actual camera, it's getting slightly frayed, but surprisingly, it's still holding up. I don't really use the official Canon strap. I did use it back in the day, my very first 2 cameras, but I noticed that it's not that comfortable. It's kind of thin, so I just bought an aftermarket strap, and these are so cheap. The foam is very comfy, it's very nice. It still has that new strap smell, so I just like the soft foam. The proximity sensor is back. Well, I don't know actually if they have it in the 200D Mark II, but it's in the camera I bought to change from this 200D, because the 100D had the proximity sensor. In my previous few cameras, I don't really remember, but I think they did have the proximity sensor. What does that do? Well, it's just like a cell phone. When you answer a phone call and it's close to your face, it turns off the screen just to save battery and whatnot, or the screen is gonna make your face too hot. This one does not have a proximity sensor at all, so when you put the viewfinder to your eye, the screen is still on. It's not really a huge problem because the screen, it doesn't really capture the outside world. It's just the menu. It's kind of dark, so it's not gonna, like, when you lift it up to your eye, it's not gonna blind you. But the M50, it has a proximity sensor, so when you lift it up to your eye, the screen turns off. The Canon EOS M50 mirrorless, when you turn on the camera, the first thing you see is the scene in front of you, not the menu, which is different from the Canon 200D and my other DSLRs before it, because when you turn that on, you don't really see the world in front of you, you see the menu. That's just something to keep in mind. It's not like a deal breaker or anything, but it's can be just kind of surprising or jarring. Even after using it for a week, I'm still finding myself a little surprised, like, oh, I turned it on, oh, it's kind of wobbly, you can see the world outside, but kind of like a point and shoot actually, or a cell phone. It could also be a little surprising because when I turn it on, I see the menu and it's dark mode. But when you turn on the EOS M50 and then the screen shows the outside world, sometimes it's very bright and it'll be like the sudden brightness. It will just have some psychological forewarning that it'll be very bright when you first turn on. Speaking of sudden brightness, when I first turned on the camera, the very first time I opened the box, I was very surprised. I was prepared for it. I knew the viewfinder is not a real viewfinder like this, but kind of like this screen, but then they put a little version in it. They put something called a guided mode. I think it's like the menu, but with all these FAQs and tutorials. And this guided mode, I don't know who uses it because the background is white. So when you put it to your eye, the very, very first time when you turn on the camera, it's very blinding. When you turn it on and you put this like this, and then you see the menu in the little screen, it's like, whoa, it just blinds you. And then it's also very blinding. So the first thing you should do is put it to standard mode, which is dark mode. How do I feel using a viewfinder that's kind of like a little screen? Feels like you're looking through a little television. It's kind of a little strange because here it's very clear. I know the more expensive DSLRs, it's even more clear, but this is pretty clear to me despite being a very budget model, this 200D SL2. But the M50, it's not that it's not clear, but it's just like looking at a screen. And sometimes when like it's kind of dim, you can see it shaky. It's just kind of like looking at a little television and it just takes some adjustment. So looking at that little TV, it feels a little weird to me, a little slightly blurry. I am nearsighted and it just feels a little weird. Now with this one, I just adjust the diopter, or I don't know how to pronounce it, diopter. Diopter moves itself and it's more clear, kind of like during the eye exam when they move a little thing. Actually, I don't know if it's the same kind of technology, but you get the idea. With the M50, it has a little diopter too. It works different. It makes it a little clearer, but not by much. But it's not that blurry, but it's not as clear. But it's okay. I can still use the LCD. It's just that if it's outside, and you know, the Philippines, it's very tropical and very sunny. Sometimes I can't see the LCD so good. So I look at the viewfinder, and then it just kind of looks slightly blurry, but not really. The eyecup is now permanent because in the 200D, I kept losing this eyecup. When you turn on the camera, when you're gonna use it, with the DSLR, you just turn it on and you're ready to go. With the M50, you turn it on, but then you're not ready to go. The lens has the little slider mechanism that you also have to turn and then unretract the lens before you can start shooting because they collapse the lens to make the footprint smaller. Now that's not a complaint because that's a feature of the item. You bought it to be small, and how could it be physically and optically possible to make a lens that's that tiny, an ultrawide, right? So the compromise is they're gonna hide it inside like a turtle, but then you gotta pull the turtle's head out again. It's just a adjustment. I keep forgetting to do that, so whenever I turn it on, I'm like, oh, why is the screen so blurry? Oh no, now the instruction says you have to, the triangle slider, you have to push it and then twist it a bit and then you're ready to go. So if you're really in a hurry, then you gotta do a two-handed move where this thumb, the right thumb, you slide the camera on, and then this thumb you do the twisting and sliding of the lens to put it into position, and then you can shoot just as fast as a DSLR. Just something to keep in mind. Now you can always keep the lens unretracted until you're ready to keep it in a bag or whatever, but you should just remember that it's unretracted because what if you're walking around and you knock it against something, right? So it's not a major deal. It's just a difference that I wanted to point out. Speaking of differences and sliders, the shortcut for adjusting focus and the lenses is gone. The EFS 24mm pancake and the EF 40mm pancake I have for this 200D, and then that 10 to 18mm that I sold, that ultra-wide, and all my other lenses before that I had that I sold, they all have this little slider that changes the focus mode, which is pretty handy. I don't really use manual focus that often, you know, my eyes are really bad. Occasionally I do though when it's very dim and then it can't find the actual thing I want to focus on, then you slide it and then you focus it. But the EOS M50, I don't know if it's like that for all the lenses of all the mirrorless cameras, but it doesn't have that little slider switch anymore, the physical one so you have to look at the menus and then you have to click the thing to, it's not really a big deal, but then you just gotta kind of look for it, so you better familiarize yourself with the menu. It would be handier to have the slider, but once you do the thing in the menu, you can actually focus with twisting the knob. In this 200D, in my menu custom settings, I have the grid function there that just with one tap I can turn on the grid or turn off the grid, because sometimes like my eyes, they don't see so well, so I don't know if something is even or not. With the EOS M50, you do have that grid function, but it's not like at a top level menu. You can't add it direct to the my menu. You have to add shooting display function, and then you have to click that, and then it will show that to turn on or off the grids and the various grids that you could see. It's not a very big deal, but then that requires 2 buttons. I don't know why it's not a top level menu item unlike the 200D. Occasionally I like to use GPS to geotag my photos, especially when I travel. I just like to remember where I was. They both connect pretty okay to the Canon camera app for Android. It's not that difficult, but there are many steps that you gotta follow. But once you paired it the first time, it's pretty straightforward. It's just that, I don't know if it's my imagination, the 200D, once I try to connect it after pairing, it seems to connect to the phone much faster than the M50. The M50 takes like half a minute longer or something. The battery life of this EOS M50 is much shorter than this 200D. I cannot give you concrete figures of like how many shots I did, but I can give you my experience, which I shot something last week, just shot like maybe 40 minutes of footage, and then I went out to dinner and I just grabbed the camera and went. I didn't charge the camera anymore because I was thinking, I'll have enough charge for like a couple minute shots of me at the restaurant, because I've done the same thing with the 200D. I've shot like semi-longish but not really very long videos, like 14 minutes, and then taken it out for to someplace else, and I was still able to continue shooting. When I took that M50 out, I shot maybe 20 seconds of footage and 10 photos, and it was out of battery. So I bought a spare battery pack. I've been shooting with the M50 for a week, and what are my impressions on the image quality? All the things I said were about the operations and the function side of the camera. The image quality is pretty good, although I don't really see that much difference from the 200D. But like I said, I'm not a professional. I think the biggest difference is in the lenses, actually. This 200D, it's very cheap. It's like a budget camera, but it can take really great photos, especially when I paired it with my EFS 24mm or that EF 40mm. With the 10 to 18mm, I've gotten some pretty good shots out of it outdoors in great light. Indoors, when it's kind of dim, it's like not that hot. But with this M50 paired with that 11 to 22mm, which is their only ultra wide for the M mount, it's actually much nicer than the 10 to 18. It is more expensive, but not by much, maybe by like $100 more, brand new, and surprisingly. So I think the lens makes a big difference, actually. The camera, not that much difference from the M50 to the 200D. I'm sure if you're a professional and there are some special features that I don't know about, you can say this is better than the other or what. But as a layman, the one who just uses the regular functions, there's no discernible difference. The difference is really on what lens you mount on it. I hope you guys found this video informative. Like I said, this video is not a professional's perspective on the mirrorless M50 or this DSLR, this 200D SL2. This is me as a regular person, an amateur photographer, not even like an amateur photography expert, but just like a person who likes to take photos like casually. My opinions on switching, what my opinions on the format is, and my opinions on operating a mirrorless camera for the very first time, the things that surprised me, the things that I found nice. Because a lot of views online, they're all really great, and I've watched them because they were part of my decision-making process to buy this camera. It wasn't an impulse buy. But a lot of those are from the perspectives of professionals. They may not even mention some stuff that a layman, an ordinary person, would find surprising. Nobody mentioned that little remote thing being gone, because if you're a professional, I think they probably have that wireless thingo, or they just got an assistant to press. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this video informative, please thumb it up and subscribe to be updated when I upload again.